Hello again, everyone, and welcome to episode 40 of the Don't Tell Me, Show Me podcast. So Simon's not here today, very unusual. So you have myself and Alan. So what should we talk about this week? Great clip that came up from a few years ago on my Facebook page where a young journalist asked a coach, what's more important, technique or attitude? And clearly the coach was very happy and he spoke about attitude. But what I want to get into with Alan here is we talk about that. If you ask most coaches, parents, athletes, they would say attitude. But why are we not cultivating that within our daily sessions? Why are we seeing the same repeat attitudes that we don't like, that don't align to our vision in matches, in training, year in, year out, and we don't seem to do anything about it? So that's going to be what we're going to talk about today. Alan, thoughts?
Well, you did. First of all, my thoughts are you did really your Simon Turner impression with an intro and an opening to the podcast. I'll give you a 9 out of 10. And I left the one is basically the Kiwi accent. We're missing the Kiwi accent, but well done, mate. That was a good Simon Turner
Well,
impression.
it's the one take, Alan.
It's a one take. I think this could be a very interesting topic, Mark, because we're talking about reality here, what happens, as we do in every podcast. But I think this is a real life scenario, real life situation that coaches, I don't think they fall at the first hurdle, but they fall at hurdles throughout the year as the season goes on and this game schedule kicks in. Because I think a lot of coaches will feel like they're doing this in the preseason and early on, but what gets in the way could be an interesting conversation as we go. Wonderful topic.
Yes, so if we bounce off that, Alan, this is only my suggestion on my experience. And what's great is we have synergy of experiences, but we also have loads of different ones that you've been in, I haven't, etc. The element I've noticed when you start, where I think it starts to trip up is, are we truly transparent in our expectations when we start in what that actually looks like, the attitude? Or are we a bit wishy-washy? Or is it the coach doing all the talking and we got one or two athletes having a bit of interaction and the rest are silently nodding along? So we're not explicit with it. We're not prepared. And we ask the questions early on. Are we prepared when we see the same behaviors, attitudes that we've seen for the last 3-4 years, whether it's with this team or another team? Am I prepared, whatever it takes, to do what I need to do in that moment as a coach and as a coaching team? Or am I setting up things I'm not even going to honor myself? So those were the two self questions I think are often the initial trip up.
They are, but you don't know what you don't know when you go into a season. And it doesn't matter if you've 30 years experience, Mark. Like I've got a lot of years experience coaching the national team, but every year is different. And I feel confident and competent in that space. But you really don't know what challenges are coming around the corner, and you can put measures in place, and you can look back on previous experiences and say, right, I'm going to troubleshoot this the next time it comes up because I've got a tool, I've got an intervention, I've got experience that I'm learning from. So I think coaches do probably do it well in the preseason early on. But the question I always ask, the systems you put in place or your culture or your way of coaching, how well does it stand up to the test of the grind? How well does it stand up to the test of the season and the games after game or the losses after loss after loss in the performance space, which can get quite heavy. And you can find yourself just pulled over here into one space that you live in too long, and you let all these other things go because the winning is sitting front and center. So I'm going to pause there because I could go off in so many different directions of what you said. With solutions and with ways of doing it better, but that might be later in the podcast. But I think what I want to acknowledge here, Mark, is it's very difficult, regardless how experienced you are, because we don't know what's coming around the corner. We don't know what we don't know. We can do our best to prevent that. But again, how good, how strong is that intervention, that system you've put in place when those moments come?
There's another podcast that's coming off what you've just said there, Alan. Is pre-season fit for purpose? So what I mean by that is a lot of, in my experience over many sports, is that question is is pre-season, and then we're into season. But where's the transition of saying, am I using pre-season to prepare when it comes to attitude, behaviors, sequences, routines, to almost do that synergy into the season? Or are we going, right, we're on it now, let's do loads of activities, let's get to know each other, let's look at now building our fundamentals, but actually we're doing it in a pre-season environment. And maybe that may be another podcast. Are we looking to, is this all transferable now? Are there things we haven't done in pre-season that we need to be starting to do now, so the athletes understand, oh, here's the expectations now, here's what it actually looks and sounds like, not just in a chat, in a conversation. So new podcast, Alan, we won't get heavily into that, but I think it's worthy of one on its own. Now, definitely we need to share some applicational tools that can help. I think going back to what you said there, Alan, I think what athletes and coaches can do, and I think this is where the collaboration needs to be. This is where I think you do a great job, Alan, is it can't be just the coach working out a master plan in their head and then going, guys, this is what we're going to do, this is what I've seen. Because what we need to do is get athletes to ask that same question of themselves, which the coach should be asking is, I know in the past, if I self-reflect, that there's been times where I should have put in an intervention. I saw it, I thought about it, but I chose to avoid it. So that's a question I need to ask myself. Why did I choose to avoid it? Was it right? Was it wrong? Do I need to change what I'm doing? Because that actually was something I should have changed, and because I let it go, this is where some of the behaviors I didn't like that caused issues later on happened for us. And this happens with so many teams, especially the type teams, basketball, netball, hockey, football, rugby, those type of teams, where we start to see things and it comes to bite us in 3-4 months' time. It might not bite us that week, but what we're doing, we're avoiding conversations that need to be had. And I think that's the first question we need to ask ourselves as coaches. Why am I avoiding in the past? Well, if I'm going to say I'm going to do that differently, well, how am I going to do differently? I'm the same person. So what do I need to think? Do I need better strategies? Do I need to make it clearer with the athletes? Do I need to have a better interactive conversation dialogue with the athletes? Go, this has happened in the past. Why didn't we, not me, why didn't we do something about it in the moment? Where were the barriers? Where are the blockers? Because I think that's worthy having a conversation now so we can look to be better next time.
I think that when those moments happen, when you let things go, it understanding the implications, I think, is the easy part. It's clear, isn't it? You keep letting that crack in the windscreen get bigger and bigger and bigger. We know what the outcome's going to be. As you say, I'm going to quote you on this one. If you continue to let the puppy poo on the carpet, we know how that's going to go, right? So we know the outcome. The question that I have, and listening to you here, you provoked the thought. The question I have, when we as coaches let things go, regardless, early in the season, during the season, the person different, we let certain people get away with things that we don't let others. What? The question I have, why do we do that? What's behind that? What is the source of power that maybe that player has, or that you create a narrative in your head that they have that source of power? And just one example, why do we let that go? I'll start the response, Mark, and I'd love you then to chime in on that one, because I think if I'm a coach listening to this podcast, I'll probably sit there and go, right, if I let things go, if I continue to let things be gray, I know this isn't going to go well. But to figure out what to do about it, I think you start with, why do I let this go first? And I'll start, if you don't mind. I think the technical, I'm going to make a statement here and probably pee off a lot of coaches, right? But it's a fact. I think the technical and tactical part of coaching, the developing of knowledge around that space, the application of that in terms of you coaching that in your practice sessions, training sessions, I think that's the easiest part of coaching. I think that is the easiest part of coaching. And my honest opinion here is, from my own experience as a practitioner, as a coach, and from supporting other coaches, I know we let things go because it is emotionally laborious to tackle it in that moment. It is difficult. It is the technical and the tactical is so much easier to get immersed and wrapped up in. And then you walk away with the fake confidence. like we're in a good place, I'm doing a good job, whether it's the silent voice in your head or you're telling others and everything in between. We walk away feeling comfortable that we're on track and we're doing our job, or that we're tackling a problem we currently have, and the solution, that the tool we're using is the tech tac. It's a safe space for coaches. It really is, because to get into those difficult conversations, to stop that crack in the windscreen before it gets bigger, to train the puppy to stop pooing on the carpet, one takes time, patience, resiliency, robustness, and it can be emotionally very laborious. And I think coaches are afraid to go into those spaces, Mark. I know I was for a period of time. You helped me massively. Geez, dare I say 14 years ago now, but we'll ask Simon to edit that bit out. But it's difficult, and I think the why is the starter.
Well, let's get into some more reasons could be why. One can be, I'm looking at that athlete, that particular athlete. I know they won't take this type of intervention well, and they'll unravel, or they'll challenge me, or they'll blame me. And because it's not going to go well before I start it, I'm going to choose to avoid it with that athlete. I see another athlete who go, yeah, they're great. They take my feedback. I've got a relationship where what I say to them, it has a reaction in the way I want to do straight away. I'll do that one. So I'm already putting my own negative barriers and beliefs. Why I'm not going to do that one, because that's going to be rough. That's going to be a rough road. Then we get into that point of, I think this is one of my, if I go pet hates, I know I've shared a few, I'd say this is number one on the list on social media. And it comes around every few years. There's this picture, and it's, this requires zero talent. And it's saying what an athlete needs to be on time, be coachable, blah, 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 blah. Absolute nonsense. That, you could argue, is part of talent, is part of the nuances of great athletes. It's not just they're physically, they have great match IQ. The purpose of them, can they manage their state? Can they accept feedback when things aren't going well? Can they interpret situations? Can they feel the room with others and having a positive influence? Can they keep being enthusiastic on things they don't like doing? Do they have the discipline to keep going even though they don't see the results? I would say that is part of talent. But here's the point that's my pet hate. That is something, and it goes back to your point, Alan, the technical tactical, I agree, is the easiest thing to coach. The craft of coaching is, how can I influence those lists that go, this takes zero talent? Well, hang on a minute. This is reality. You have an athlete that doesn't like taking feedback. You have an athlete that is looking for you all the time and they won't make decisions for themselves. You have an athlete that gets frustrated with their teammates when they don't do high expectation stuff. Okay, how are you going to deal with that? How are you going to communicate in a way to have an intervention that relentlessly, patiently will see an effect in 2, 3, 4 weeks? Not in that session. And I think that's going back to one of the key points is us as coaches, managers, parents, we need to understand an intervention isn't a solution fix. An intervention may be an igniter of a facilitation of change that may take weeks and months, but I have to be clear on it. They need to understand the why before we start, back to the pre-season transition. And then all I need to do is agree those what ifs. So, okay, well, what if, we've all nodded, but what if this happens? Now, it's cold where it's dark. We're 3 weeks into the season. We've lost 4 in a row. We've knocked out of the cup. And now things aren't going well. And now I know, based on what we agreed, if you're not having an intervention between yourselves, the rule of 2, and itself, I'm going to have it. Now we're in that moment. Now what do you expect from me? And if I do my bit, let's agree what I expect from you and you expect for yourself. So almost those what if moments. And I think that's where there's a little bit of grey when we set it up. But also then that's in that moment, and the last episode was judgment, and it fits perfectly into judgment, is when I'm looking back at when I didn't do it, was my judgment, it's the right thing to do, but I'm choosing not to because it's going to be a pain. And there's going to be trauma here, using the word lightly, and trauma as the bandwidth of there's going to be some conflict. There might be a negative spiral, might be events, someone might storm off. We've seen that before. Someone might start crying. We've seen that before. The relationship might separate. We've seen that before. So now I'm thinking, well, my judgment is the right thing to do, but I'm going to choose to avoid because I'm already predicting what could happen, and I prefer that not to happen. So I'll do it next time, and the next time comes, we avoid again. So this is where linking into, have we set it clarity? Have we used pre-season to put in some really uncomfortable moments deliberately to seek opportunities to then for me to commit to what I agree and to see if they respond in the way we agree, but also then honor it, continue to honor it, even when I don't feel like it, back to an effective judgment. I think, look at those nuances. I think the key thing coming out of that, which I'm working with some clients now that have this issue, is they've got some athletes who go, I can interact with this person, no problem. Good or bad, it's going to be an okay conversation. I've had bad experience with this athlete, or I haven't had an experience, but when they spiral, they go for it. And I'm just uncomfortable having that interaction now because it might disrupt everybody else. So I'm going to avoid it.
If I'm listening to this podcast, I'd go back and listen to those 5 minutes that you've just spoke on there because there's a lot in there, but it's all connected. But there's a
Yeah.
lot of layers to what you've just said, Mark, in 5 minutes. There are a lot of layers, very, very fruitful and powerful if you as a coach can digest that and then think about how can you act on that in your world, in your environment, with your people. But you go back to that list, there's a couple of things I want to touch on. You go back to that list, your pet peeve, right? And they say, it doesn't take talent to be on time. It doesn't take talent to be every times with everything. Well, what my response to that is, well, how much of that can you attribute to your coaching? Because if you can actually, though that list of 10 things, we should actually share it on here somewhere. That list of 10 things, if you can attribute your athletes doing those things well, you've done a great job as a coach. If your players and your athletes are not doing those things well, then they're just human. They are just human. Your job is to help them be awesome and be excellent in those areas of being on time, working hard, being consistent, being food prep ready, getting your mobilization in. And your job as a coach is to coach that to the players. It's not like what you want. What do you want here? Robots that you can just roll out technical and tactical actions with. And I think that unboxes a whole nother topic, and we won't get into it. Like, what is coaching? That's coaching. Questions of attribution, Mark, I think are very powerful, where you as a coach identify the impact you had as a coach with these athletes above and beyond what would have happened anyway. If you weren't there, what would have happened? And then measure the impact of your presence and your interventions and your support and your guidance and your nudging. Those questions of attribution are really interesting for coaches, but coaches won't go there because it could be scary what you attribute to what's going on, because there's attribution failure, and then you go back to the why, like creating that narrative. I'll join the dot here. I just wrote it down as you were talking. We create narratives based on fear, not based on reality. So you take that difficult player that we think we're going to have we're going to challenge that player being late consistently, and we're worried. We create a narrative in our head about how that's going to play out. There's two things wrong with that. One, you could be completely wrong.
Yeah.
Two, it's actually unfair to make a judgment about how somebody else will react. Give them the opportunity to react before we judge. It's unfair to do that. Like, Mark, if I say to you, Mark, I can't make this morning's Zoom call, and I just keep kicking the can down the road and ignoring it, and you go, right, you ready? And go, oh yeah, I'll be with you. Oh, sorry, something's come up. When I knew an hour ago, I could have just clicked the phone and said, listen, I can't make today. It's tough for me. Like, it's not fair on me to judge how you're going to respond. And especially in performance environments, the reality is this: everybody in that performance environment has one goal, and that is to do individually, to do well, and then collectively to do well. The last thing, there's two other things, Mark, and I'm going to probably hopefully trigger you to give a great example with the second thing I'll say. But the first thing in the last two, you talk about a storm. People say to me, you've had a lot of support as a coach. Your name comes up a lot, right? Globally, people around the world know that I've had support from you, and they've seen benefits to that. I've had performance directors that have seen the benefits of you and Simon supporting me in my journey, right? One thing I enjoy sounds a bit sadistic and a bit weird, but I enjoy the storm. I walk towards the storm, and here's why, Mark. I want to get out of it. And I know the only way this storm is going to keep coming. The only way I can't run it away from it. It'll be there. It'll catch me eventually, and it might catch me where I lose my job and get fired if I'm a professional coach. It may catch me, and I'm really not enjoying the experience that I'm having as a volunteer coach. So going towards it, stepping towards that storm, you actually come out of it quicker, and you come out of it in a healthier space. Can I ask you to share a story? You're pulling me towards thoughts of years ago when you supported me. We won't say the club or the player's name, but you supported me in a club environment when I was an assistant coach, and then I became the head coach. You continued to support me there for a year or two, and we had a very strong-minded, strong-willed player, big guy, 6'9", powerful presence, lovely guy,
Mm.
mature, but emotionally led with how he played because he really cared. And I think back to my days as being an assistant coach there. He was avoided by people, some of
Yeah.
his teammates, the head coach in particular. And you did some amazing work with him because you walked towards him and you met him where he's at, and you gave him the opportunity to actually express himself. You didn't avoid that because of the shadow he could cast, where I felt coaches and players would have done that. Would you share your approach to how you worked with that particular player? And inevitably, Mark, what you did. Sorry, before you go. Inevitably, what you did is you did the head coach's job for him, which is fine because that's the support he needed at that time. But the head coach reaped the benefits of the intervention and the approach you took. Would you mind riffing on that a little bit?
Yeah, so let's link it links very well into your reasons why you should do the intervention with an athlete anyway. You've shared that actually, well, you don't know how they're going to respond, so that's on you. But also, going back to this example, we will know how that person responds because that's how they respond every single time when it's a nightmare. So this was somebody that fantastic guy, intelligent, knew the game. You could argue higher match IQ than many of the athletes around him, higher expectations, unfair expectations often of the team around him in those capability combinations. But I could see when things weren't going well, you could see what was happening where he was building his frustration in his head silently. And then he was doing a bit of a chat, and you could see no, 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 no. And then the vent happened, and he was lost control. He's shouting at people. The coach is not having an effective interaction with coach, and everyone's just avoid, avoid, avoid. And you could see this repeated to a point where he stormed off. And I'm not speaking to coach. Things need to change before I come back to that level. And he was the top player in the team, to be fair. So all I did was, again, yes, coaches, when they have the craft, it's easy for me. I'm not emotionally involved. I will put that out there straight away. It's a lot easier for me than some coaches. So all I did is when he was in a more calm place, I just had a one-to-one conversation and just going, okay, just if you looked about what a great athlete is in attributes, wherever they are, and and the ones that really are killers for great athletes, where are they are? I said, well, where are you? And he goes, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, well, but what about this one over here? Let's use some examples. He goes, yeah, that's killing me. Well, how about that within the team? So all I was doing was raising awareness to what you're doing is preventing you from being the great athlete you are capable of becoming, but also it's killing the team because no one's giving you effective and honest feedback in those moments. So he got to a point in this conversation. I'm shortcutting this conversation. He got to a
Yeah.
point where he had self recognition, and he goes, "Right, I'm ready to come back now." And so my point was, "No, you're not." So then he looks at me quite surprised. I thought this conversation was me going back with the team. So we started, "Oh, I'm not coming back with the team unless the coach apologises," and bang. So when we got to, okay, I'm ready to come back now. I don't need a coach to apologise. And I said, "No, you're not ready yet." And he was sorry. I said, "You're not ready because what you haven't done is, and let me ask you this question," this was to him, "is what are you going to do differently to prevent it from happening again, specifically?" And then there was this pause, and it was quite a long pause. And he says, "Mark, no one's asked me that question before." And I said, "Well, that's the answer to that will determine whether you're ready to come back or not. So we had the conversation. He said, right, this is what I need to do different. I guided him on when you're starting to feel that element, what's causing it. So there was lack of clarity, lack of pre-agreement, being early with the conversation, setting fair expectations of others. So there was some critical elements that would help prevent, but also then it was happening, what we're going to do, reach out. I'm starting to get annoyed now. So I'm struggling. Okay, what conversation can we have at that point? So I said, that's great. And he goes, okay, it's good. I said, right, well, the next question is, who do you need to share that with before you come back? And he was like, sorry. I says, who do you need to share it with? And he went, the coach. So we got to a point, everybody, basically. Everyone of influence that has seen his behaviours before, he needs to share it with. So we agreed. I spoke to the coach, and I know yourself, right, he's coming back. He just needs 5 minutes in the change room with everyone. And he comes back. He'd had a chance to share. An important point here is for everyone listening is you can't share and then put a but on the end. That is not a facilitation of change. That's actually going, I'm kind of apologizing, but as soon as I put a but on it, I'm not. I'm back to blame. So there can't be buts for this. So he came in and he shared, look, I've had a good reflection. I've had a good conversation with Mark, and this is what I need to do better. This is unacceptable for me. This is what I need to do better. This is what I'm going to commit to, but also this is where I need your help. So if you see me doing this, I'm giving you permission to do these things. So we set that up, but also part of that conversation was when I had with him is when he agreed, okay, this is what I'm going to do differently. I started to play that devil's advocate. Okay, well, what happens if things aren't going well? What happens here? Just looking in situations to get him reality, not just, oh, this is a good chat, which often happens. No, reality. Are you ready for this? Okay, we go. So when the thing I had to put with the athletes, I know you did some great work there, is whisper in the ear with the other athletes and with him. How are you doing now? What are you seeing? So what are you going to do? That rule of 2 and 1, building it up. To put those, initiate the interventions, but also having a little chat with the coaches, making sure, are you clarity and success? Are you setting the UEs around things? If an athlete's got an idea, are you having a conversation with the influencers early, not just blocking them? So it was a two-way thing. And I think you'll agree that, and that was on him, not on me, by the way, the fact he was open to change and committed to the change, the environment transformed and he transformed.
Yeah, I watched it unfold, and I had the privilege of being the assistant coach, Mark. So that was difficult for a head coach because there was a dynamic at play, a dysfraction or a dysfunctional and fractured relationship was at play. So for the head coach, I'm talking about, and the player, so it was difficult, really difficult, and actually. So as assistant coach, from kind of somewhat in a safe space through while this was all going on, and just taking all the learning I could. I mean, I was going back to the office, writing notes on what I'd observed in that session and the process. It was very helpful for me, and it's helped me navigate many challenging relationships. Maybe it's why I enjoy them, because I feel safe in those spaces, because I know there's more behind it. Authenticity is behind the behavior, and that links me on to say. He wanted feedback, he wanted dialogue, and that's what you discovered with having that, him saying stuff like, no one's ever said that to me, or creating a narrative about how he's going to respond. He actually wanted feedback. He wanted dialogue, he wanted clarity. Like, he was giving, if you think about it, the irony of all this, he was giving information to a coach who's willing to listen about the things he needed to perform at his best, i.e. influence winning, i.e. influence performers, because he's the best player. He's so influential to the guys around him as well. The irony of it all is, if you don't go into that space, you don't walk towards that storm, you're missing the opportunity to win more games, more than likely. I thought that was brilliant. The other thing as well, Mark, and you've just touched off it at the end there, this was more than you. It was more than the head coach. He needed support around him, like we all do. And this wasn't, all right, I'm ready to go back now. No, it's not. You're ready when you're ready. Let's have more conversations about what you're going to change. But then what was going on over here was you working with the head coach and trying to get him to understand, raising awareness of each other. Then you're talking about his teammates, right? Who on this team? And I remembered we identified one key teammate to actually gave him the responsibility to identify his triggers, to identify that player's triggers. And if you see him bubbling, we supported that specific
Yep.
player with an intervention of how to tackle that live in action during the game, during the practice, not during the timeout, not during the halftime team talk, but while they're in action, running back on defense, attacking on offense. That player, we helped him develop a skill set to actually support his teammate to be his best version of himself in the heat of the game. And here's the beauty of that, Mark. Coaches say to me all the time, we've no leaders on our team. We've no leadership. We're too quiet. Now, there's a reason you have no leaders. The reason they're too quiet because you won't shut up is one of the reasons. But you talk about how do we develop leaders. That was, even though we were working with this great player over here and helping him manage his state so he could be the best version while he's performing, we were actually developing leaders amongst the group in order to support his journey. And it was a really interesting, I won't say it was a ripple effect because it was part of the process.
Yeah.
But at that time, I remember going away thinking, wow, that's a wonderful way to develop leadership amongst other players. And it's a double-edged sword then, isn't it?
Yeah, and if you look at, there's so many elements there that we could do many podcasts on. You can see now, again, that rule of three starts popping up with a level of texture a lot of people don't understand. So what we're saying is we've got rule of three, which is at one is self, I'm doing great. I'm not doing great. I'm self-managing. I'm struggling. So before I explode, I'm going to reach out. Now, if I've reached out to some buddies that I know I've now got a connection with where they understand my triggers, if they're not noticing, not reach out, I'm struggling now, they can step in. But we're saying rule of two, you're scanning, you're seeing the traits because we're now spotted where someone starts to struggle. Okay, I'm going to have an effective impact. So what are we agreeing between ourselves of when I see you struggling, what can I say that's going to have an effective connection with you? Okay, well, don't say these things, that will just wind me up. But say these things, and this can really help me. So there's a dialogue of interaction of those buddies. The other thing that the texture is what we're saying to people, and goes back to leadership and teamwork. With that particular athlete, it was the same example. He was sharing when he was getting frustrated what people were doing wrong. So one of the texture points is, that's great, everyone can do that. But what's effective is, can you spot early if they're doing something wrong? Can you spot, based on their capability, what they can change, whether it's in choice, execution, communication, timing, and can you share the solution with them in a way that they understand and they can do something with? So not over data load like coaches often do. Oh yeah, I can do that. And he was very good at that, but he wasn't doing it. As soon as he started doing that, he goes, oh my gosh, it's so much easier. One, because now I'm not getting wound up as much because I'm setting myself to what they're capable of. But because I'm sharing a solution, I'm getting a bit of interaction back, so people aren't avoiding me. So now I get two-way elements. So this is where all of this starts fit together. Basics on having clarity, understanding your teammates, being solution-based, communicating early with something that's going to add value, but also learning to accept feedback, but also learning what to say to what people on your team that's going to allow you to have an effective feedback. So we talk about the start of this, the subject of this podcast, we talk about attitude. Even in this last 10 minutes of what you shared and I've just shared there, Alan, the texture of attitude is key. Attitude isn't just turning up in time. Hey, what is it I need to do to be there? So that might be time management. That might be understanding others on a team, that it's not just about me, it's about everyone's waiting for me. So I'm going to make sure I can do something with that. But back to a point you made earlier, Alan, this is where you and I have a difference of opinion, but actually when we start to talk about it, it's the same. We are synergized. When I set standards, not in leisure, in performance teams, I'm kind of a 97% consistency. It needs to be there. And the 3 is just the nuances of human. But my 97% is based on what you're capable of. So I might have a bigger range on that, but it has to be on what people are capable of. And that may stretch as they move. The point you made, which is an important point you made a few podcasts ago, is that point of if someone's turning up late 2-3 times, the first time they turn up late, when I have a window, I need to just be inquisitive, not a telling off, is just to understand, why you were late. So 2 things are going to happen. Well, 3 things are going to happen. What the third one is, I don't know, which is, okay, well, let's think it through. But one might be, oh yeah, I left home and I got caught up in traffic. And you're thinking, okay, so that's a time management thing. If your sat nav says it takes 22 minutes, but now it's 5 o'clock. It might take 35 minutes. So what are you doing about leaving earlier to ensure, oh, I haven't thought about it like that. So now that's a thing they can change because now they're thinking ahead in the reality of the world. The third one can be, as you quite rightly pointed out, it might be, well, my parents finish at 5:30. They're my lift. So it's how early my parents finish. My dad runs this business and sometimes he's caught up late and I'm waiting for the dad. We can't afford bus, taxis and cars. So he picks me up and takes me. So it's a bit out of my control, coach. So then the coach goes, no problem at all. Can you let me know in advance if your dad's running late? So then I can give you some warm-ups to start. We can make sure Billy or Sarah can connect you in the success of the session when you come. No problem at all with that. So what we're doing is we're seeking understanding. All of those will determine my 70, 98% of actually my response will be different based on now I understand. So my last point, Alan, and there's so much I'm sort of stricken back here. My last point is, and it goes back to what you said about 8-9 minutes ago, is when we're having that challenge in person, we either know this is always going to be challenging. In the past, it's been not thinking it's ever going to change because that's our limiting belief. And I'm choosing not to. If we're choosing not to, then we can't end that there. So if I'm choosing not to based on my judgment, says this is going to disrupt the whole session and I really want this to go well, I've got to do my loop back. So this is what I call priming. So what I've got to do is I need to have an interaction with that athlete when they're in a calmer state and say, look, and if I can film it and legal to do so, I definitely would. Just that few minutes example or a few and say, look, I just want to play this back and what you think about this and have that dialogue. You're great, Alan says, can I have permission to share this with you? You open to this? Yes, coach. Great. Here we go. So this is what I see great in you. But let's have a look at this. What do you think about that? The impact on you and your performance, your state, your enjoyment, but also the impact of the team. Says, right, I'm choosing not in this moment because I don't think we have an agreement where it's going to go well in this moment. So that's why I didn't do it. But I really want to have a conversation with you now to figure out why, spot your triggers, but also what can I do and what can you do differently that's going to help us be more effective in those moments, and have the dialogue, agree what it looks like. And you've shared a great one. Is there teammates around that can be part of this? Share it with everyone of influence. And now I've got an honor trigger. I've primed them. We've got an agreement. There's value to it. The why's in there. Now I'm looking for it. So if it's Billy or Sarah will connect, I'm looking at it. Billy, Sarah hasn't. Pull Billy over. Billy, what you seeing there? What have we agreed? Off you go. So there's a little sideline intervention. If that's not happening, I go to 3 and I do my bit. But I do the bit that's been pre-agreed that in this moment you're giving me permission to do. And if I do this, what are you going to agree you're going to do? So then we do the intervention. Now, in those moments, although it still might be uncomfortable, we might not get a fantastic outcome. The outcome's definitely going to be better than just thinking, oh, I'm going to avoid, or I'm going to go for it again, and it's a negative spiral. So I just wanted to share that as another intervention example.
Yeah, no, that's again a wonderful. There's so much richness in there, Mark, and it's really funny watching you trying to hold back, giving more and more and more because it's really like what we're talking about here. It just points to how complicated, not complicated, how difficult coaching is if you're not intentional about equipping yourself or learning from real life examples that you're having, real life experiences. Like, what are you doing with those real? Because every coach listening to this will have experienced a difficult conversation. Most will probably have experienced avoiding difficult conversations and allowing the gray areas to exist for some players, maybe not all. So it's not easy. And what you've explained there, again, I would just encourage coaches to go back and listen to you for the last 5, 6, 7 minutes, because there's actionable stuff inside there you've talked about. We've kind of gone to the quick hitters already here with that, but that wasn't it. That was a combination of quick hitters you just gave. I thought it was brilliant. I loved what you've just done about early on in what you've just shared there, Mark. You talked about reframing attitude. You didn't talk about reframing attitude. You talked about what attitude actually is, but actually we don't see it that way as coaches enough. Like reframing it for it being more than just bad attitude and good attitude. I mean, that's just surface level, like school type of definition. What we're talking about is a performance enhancer. Like if you double down on coaching attitude to the ways you just demonstrated, it's in fact a performance enhancer is what it is. It enhances performance. Mark, again, I'm conscious of time, but I just want to, you also did a wonderful job within this space around facilitating coaching attitude versus the technique as the topic of the podcast is. You did a wonderful job with my assistant coach. When I finally moved one seat over and became the head coach, I'll just try to probe your memory here. I had a very eager assistant coach who was incredibly eager around tactical in particular, set plays, offenses, tactics against this defense, tactics, and wanted to spend all his time in that space. Whereas you coached him wonderfully to be a more helpful assistant for me. And I guess this is useful for any assistants that are listening to this podcast. If your coaching attitude and if you're an assistant coach and coaching attitude was your complete remit, you've got a big job, number one. You may have the most important job, number two. And it's exciting the impact. We talk about questions of attribution. If you're an assistant coach, what can you attribute to the success of this team? And if it's coaching attitude because the head coach didn't have the headspace or wasn't that way inclined, you can do this. Like, you don't need permission to do this either, because you can't go without it. It'd be great if you can recall that support you gave to that assistant coach. It'd be wonderful if you could share any examples from that time.
So we'll do a very short version because there was many
Yes.
nuances to that. So,
Well, if we don't do a short version, Simon Turner's going to crucify us when
Yes.
he hears this
what
episode.
time is this, you guys?
You'd be
Can't
calling
leave in 5
pineapple right
minutes.
now.
Yeah. So one of the things that, and again, this is why there's about 150 hours in my members area talking about all these stuff, in simple elements. One of the key elements to head coach and support coach, assistant coach, is making sure that you've got clarity on roles that could switch. So generally, the head coach has a bigger vision on technical and tactical, on the big picture, on program and design, generally speaking. So the assistant coach is what can I do to enhance the team? Now, what's very difficult for any coach, and there's people listening and they go, Mark, I'm the only coach. I get that. Then there might be some parents you can go, who's an enthusiastic parent that I could support with this? Injured player, if you've got one, whoever it is. So what we're looking at, if you have two people, if you pre-agree on roles of, if head coach is going to work on technical, tactical in these elements, you can, and I call it software and hardware, Alan, as you know, hardware being technical, physical, technical, software being all the attitude and stuff, decision making, communication, reacting to feedback, judgment, all those elements. So what I'm looking at there is say to the coach, okay, I want you to, how can you enhance and how can you look for these areas that could be impacting the technical, tactical? Again, the action review process helps with that, is state scanning, identifying the options, identifying the influence that will inform your choice, level of commitment, what's preventing you from committing, and then the review. Okay, so would you do it again? What would you change? Looking not at results, looking at actually what I did. So all of a sudden now the assistant coach going, whoa, hang on, I haven't thought about that. So we'll start scanning for that. So if we're now agreeing certain behaviors on looking for, what can you do on little hot one-to-ones where you pull a player to the side or they're on the sideline, what are you seeing that can enhance that area, so then the head coach can still work on that technical and tactical element. So often what tends to happen is, and I remember we'll definitely get Dean from Evo on, because he's a great going through the journey. A lot of coaches, what ends up, when they start saying, you want me to look for these elements? Yeah, start looking for them now. I'll just be a shadow whispering in your ear. What are you seeing now? And their brain just implodes. You go, oh my God, there's so much I've been missing. Now I'm looking for it. And again, the art of scanning, knowing what to look for and connecting, they're not trying to collate all the data. But all of a sudden now, that assistant coach is starting to see elements that you think, wow, yeah, that's why that person's struggling. But if I can do hot one-to-ones and look for it in those areas of an enhancement, one, it's going to improve me as a coach, but it's going to enhance the athletes, but also it's going to enhance what the coach is doing in the technical, tactical side. So long story short, if we then connect to, right, let's agree roles. Now, it may be a flip. It may be, half an hour into the session, we shift roles and said, right, now you're leading in the technicals. I want you to learn a bit of defense. You're good in that side. I'm going to scan for these behavior elements. And we're switching the roles. The lead coach does that. But because we're switching roles, we know we don't have to scan for all of it. We're scanning for those elements. But then teaching them that little hot one-to-one, where you just pull a player out, says, talk to me what you're seeing over there. But because you're scanning for the behavioral stuff, the software stuff and not the hardware, you start to see things you missed before, but you're starting an ability to have a communication that can enhance an area that isn't only the language of the technical tactical.
Brilliant. You pull me back to those wonderful days. This has been a nice trip down memory lane for me, in fact. Right, I'm gonna put my Simon Turner hat on. I
Okay.
think we've been going 45 minutes, so should we move on to the quick fire buzz around where we share some
Yes.
practical interventions?
Yes.
And just to position it again for the listeners, because Mark, I listened to our podcast back. And I think we talk about so many rich things that happen in the real world of coaching that sometimes you can go off and we can go off on many tangents, and it can be perceived as going off on many tangents, but it just demonstrates the depth of that aspect of coaching. So I'll just reposition this for the listeners. Today we were talking about basically technique versus attitude, and it was a post that came up that triggered the thought for you again, Mark, like the importance of coaching attitude. And that's pretty much what we're putting front and center of your coaching journey, and everything else gets kind of mapped around it or layered around it in effect. So what would be your first practical intervention or quick hitter that a listener could go, right, I can do something with that when it comes to coaching attitude?
I'll do a heavy hitter and then
Go
some
for it.
tools. You, as coaches, do not expect high level technical tactical. Do not expect high level attitude. It's on you to cultivate both, not just one.
Yeah, the expectations versus acceptance is a huge one, and I'll piggyback off of that actually and talk about that one. I think when we go into every season, Mark, we whether we're in the pro level, we buy in players, or we're in a volunteer level, and we don't know what's coming through the door. We often go in there with unrealistic expectations based on no reality. So you're setting yourself up. You're setting the first hurdle up way too high. You're not going to get over it. You're going to actually fall over it. So I think there's an element of as humans, we do set expectations, and when those expectations are not met, we start to think that life is unfair, and then we respond and react in ways that are not helpful for anybody. So just get rid of that expectation from day one. Go in there with a baseline level of just accept what's going on in front of you and start your journey there. No expectations. I'm going in here with the mindset of just accepting what's going on in front of me, and work from there.
Reflect back on the last season, again, if it's with the team you're with now or a previous team, and look at the elements in the attitudinal element, the software of elements when you know you should have put an intervention in, but you chose to avoid. Ask yourself why, and ask yourself, is it just a commitment thing? Is it I need to learn more skills, craft in that area? If so, there's a place we can go, we can learn that. Or is it actually I was a little too grey at the beginning, so I need to be more clarity on the permissions and the what ifs around what that attitude looks like.
Very good. I would say even if you work alone, so I'm going to go down to the volunteer ends and then I'll come back up to the performance ends where some have too many around them. Don't do it alone. Don't try to coach attitude alone. So let's go to the community coach, the local club coach that washes the kit, drives the minibus, and does everything by themselves. All those kids have parents. Bring them on the journey. Uh, Take them on a journey of support where they can better influence their kids to align with what you're trying to coach and how you're trying to coach, which includes all those components of attitude we talked about. If you go down the other end of that and you've got the pro coach, the performance coach, who's got assistants, strength and conditioning, owners, athletic directors, make sure they're crystal clear on what you're doing and how you're doing it and why you're doing it, because they're part of the journey. So we did it's another episode, influencing the influencers. How are you going to influence the influencers of those players?
Yeah,
And that's at both ends of the spectrum, Mark. You don't have to do this alone, regardless if you work alone or you've got a staff of 10.
absolutely. And piggybacking off that, when you're talking about the leadership, you mentioned it. is ensuring that everyone that's an influence, and everyone is an influence, but there's higher influence in your team. Even if you're on your own, you're looking at the players in front of you, is get them all to understand, be solution based, not problem based, but be it live, not after action. Don't come to me after 2, 3 weeks, goes, coach, the players aren't happy with this. Too late. We can't go back in time. In that moment, what did you recognize at the time? What did you do about it? Live, were you part of the problem or the solution? And if you couldn't, when did you feed back to me live? Because I need it then. I need it now. But are we focused on solution, or are we just focused on looking for problems and sharing them too late? So that's an element you can really influence within your team. I've done this from 6 years olds up, so don't think they're too young to understand that as a strategy.
We've already mentioned this one, but try not, it's easy to say don't, try not to create a narrative of how that difficult conversation will play out. Try to be in that moment, put on your brave hat and try to be as brave as you can, because what you'll find is more than 9 times out of 10, maybe 10 times out of 10 in certain environments, that conversation will go a lot better than you anticipated. So if there's gray areas, if there's players being let off the hook for too long and you feel like I can't do anything now, you can. Just be brave, because that will end up being a lot better than you anticipate. So don't create a narrative based on fears, and give that person enough respect to not create how you think they will respond. Let them respond the way they do.
We might have to pine up me near the end of these. You can be the Simon L on these. So another important one is, once you've done the baseline as you shared, understand in that software attitude and element where your priority is. You might have being ready priority, and then in the moment in coaching priority. Once you've chosen those, don't think you're going to fix them in a day. Share them with everyone. Put some UEs around them: acceptable, unacceptable, exceptional, if there is one. And then every single time as a practice session, that needs to be live on the board. I use little whiteboards if you want to. Every time they come in for a timeout, we have that, whether you call it attitude or software, with the hardware, together in synergy, review each one. That allows everyone to keep it alive and not just talk about it post-action. We can communicate and enhance and celebrate in action. That's a fantastic tool, but be relentless with it. It's going to take months, not days, to shift attitude. Be ready for that.
So that's closely aligned to my last one. I'm going to call pineapple here. So we'll go one more each, and we'll let you finish off. I think you mentioned closely related to that, and I'm signaling our next podcast, which you've already done. I'm re-signaling it. Is the preseason fit for purpose? I love that statement, and it relates to this because coaching attitude is a continuous process. It's not something you do when you think you have time, i.e., the competitive schedule hasn't started yet. It's a continuous process post-season. There's no washout effect here. This is a culture. This is a way of being. And I think if you rephrase, and you reframed it earlier, you reframe what attitude is, you'll start to see that it is a performance enhancer, but it's a continuous process that doesn't stop. And yeah, it just really signals a wonderful podcast is your preseason fit for purpose. All right, last one from you, so Mark.
So, as the great Russian general that retired undefeated said, train hard, fight easy. I've seen that when I've gone in special forces and other military tours. I've seen that written on so many headquarters lines. Relate that to your sport. The whole point is saying, when things get tough, see it as an opportunity to test and cultivate attitudes, the software around the hardware. Don't avoid them, search for them, embrace them when they arrive, but share that attitude to struggle with every single athlete, every single age, and get them involved in that as an opportunity to not avoid, to embrace, to cultivate.
Brilliant. That's wonderful, Mark. I think we can wrap up there.
Okay, Simon will be pleased.
Simon will be pleased, and Simon will be back with us next week. So yeah, thanks for that, Mark. I think that was a wonderful session. Like, there's a lot of takeaways, a lot of practicalities, and it was all based on real life examples as well. It was really nice for me to take a trip down memory lane in the early days of your support. So yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Mark.
And the annoying thing is because we are sharing raw stuff we think is going to add value, the algorithms don't like us for that. So if you're listening to this, please like, please share, please comment. There must be something you're taking from this. It's going to help us get it out to more people. And the whole point of us doing this is to help coaches. So don't be selfish in this moment. If you've listened to something, give us feedback. If you disagree, give us feedback. But it takes 1 second to like, share, follow, and that's really going to help get the word out there. And you could be the person giving somebody something that's going to add value to what they do in the next year, 2 years, 3 years. So please do that for us. Only if you see value, of course. Thanks, Alan. I shall see you
Thanks,
next
Mark.
week.